like everyone to introduce him or herself. Identify yourself by what organization in the community you're with or where you live in the community. Elaine Chapnick, president of the local summit.
That's not going to
Oh,
go around.
you know what?
Just going to have to shout.
Shout out very loud.
Good morning, Shirley Hilton, Summit and Human Rights Board. Lynette C., Summit, Continuing Ed and Student Aid Fund.
Malcolm Froman, Summit Board and President of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force.
Norris Block, Summit Board, and also the Hunger Task Force.
Don Gray, what is that?
All agents and prehistoric board members.
Frank Owens, part of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Solar campaign.
Great.
Jeff Megan, Summit Board, LMC TV Board.
Dave Finch, trustee, Village of Mamaroneck.
Julie Roach, Burbio.com is a free local calendar sharing platform, and if you're interested in getting a calendar for your organization, you can link to your website, send out your flyer in the back, or come talk to me.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Monique Fayad. I'm a Larchmont resident. My children go to Larchmont middle school and elementary school, and I'm also a STEM professional.
Great. Thank you.
Elizabeth Sanger, Summit Board and Human Rights Committee.
Bob Sanger, Mamaroneck Solar.
Carrie Sleeper, School Board Selection Committee.
Great.
Bill Oldham, Larchmont 125th Anniversary.
Great. Great.
Louder.
Van Eyck, Larchmont 125.
Excuse me, explain what that is. A lot of people don't know that. Very
It is a birthday party.
Yeah, but very quickly.
Okay,
Just-
Larchmont's getting ready to celebrate its 125th anniversary, so we have put together a committee. It's a nonprofit group, and so we are taking no taxpayer dollars to put on this show. It's going to start this September and go through the actual anniversary, which is September 2016.
Thank you. Okay.
You got the full.
Oh,
Peter Cohen, JCY, Westchester Community Partners, volunteer, Larchmont Mamaroneck.
Great.
Eileen Barber, Rhineland CA.
Janet DeMacy, Summit Board, Women's Club, Center for Continuing Ed, and I Care.
Yes, everywhere.
Good morning, Debbie Minetta, Director of Public Information for Mamaroneck Schools.
Harmon McAllister, Larchmont Mamaroneck STEM Alliance, Westchester Children's Museum, and Home on the Sound, Utilities Institute.
He's quite active also, okay.
Paul Galvez, Larchmont resident and person of interest.
Great.
Sabrina Fiddleman, Summit, LNCTV, and Hunger Task Force.
Iris Free, Hope Community Service.
Janet O'Connell, Summit Board, at Home on the Sound, St. John's.
Bill Crawford, I'm pastor of Larchmont Avenue Church, on the Summit Board, Hispanic Resource Center Board, and the Human Rights Center.
Great.
Good morning, Keith Yares, Mamaroneck Public Schools, Summit Board, and Human Rights Committee.
Great, thank you. But before I finish, I think there's going to be an envelope that goes around. I want to make sure that everyone puts their $8 for breakfast in the envelope.
And
Thanks
then
very
everybody
much.
signs our
And that everybody
attendance sheet.
and sign the attendance sheet with your email so that you can be added to our list.
And you want to be on
Right.
our list.
Exactly.
And I'm
Thank you.
Mary Lee Berry, keeper of all these important.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn the meeting over, excuse me. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Sabrina.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you all for coming out on this lovely day. I guess it could be Boston, so we're all pretty happy to be here, I guess. Before I begin, I just want to thank my co-committee members, Lynette C. and Carolyn Pomerantz, who I guess is not here this morning, for putting this meeting together. And of course, we thank our speakers in advance. Today, we'll be getting a primer and a slightly more advanced course of study in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which is a sort of new, organic curriculum initiative that's very important now in the lives of our children, and I want to thank our speakers for coming to talk. Our first speaker today is Meg Koifer, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read your biography. Meg is an educator, community organizer, and fundraiser. She's also a community resident and mother of 5 children. As president and founding, that alone gets you some accolades here. As president and founding member of the STEM Alliance of Larchmont Mamaroneck, Meg brings her training and certifications in education to her work of promoting science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. Her teaching career focused on inner-city education, progressive education models, process-based reading and writing curriculum development, as well as bilingual and second language acquisition models, a master of all trades. Throughout her career, Meg has championed STEM learning for its capacity to engage all varieties of learners while inspiring the next generation of innovators, creative design specialists, and entrepreneurs. Highlights from her work include hosting grassroots maker groups, which I assume you guys will explain and talk about today, for elementary and middle school age children, and serving as the liaison between the National Maker Corps program and the Mamaroneck School District. She was the driving force behind STEMtastic Saturday, a hands-on festival of STEM learning that attracted 2,000 attendees in its inaugural year. Meg will be speaking first today. She'll give us our background information on STEM, why it's important, and provide a broad perspective and overview of STEM in public education nationwide. So we welcome you, Meg Koifer. Thank you for coming. And our second speaker today will be Superintendent Dr. Robert Shapps. This is Dr. Shapps' 5th year as superintendent of the Mamaroneck Public Schools. During his tenure so far, Dr. Shapps has had a keen eye on all areas of the district's curriculum. In addition to collaborating with Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Annie Ward, to oversee major reading and writing initiatives, Dr. Shapps is particularly proud of all the STEM work taking place throughout the schools. Dr. Shapps has always believed passionately about the importance of STEM in equipping students with 21st century skills and teaching them to be confident, critical thinkers. At the high school, under Dr. Shapps' leadership, the computer science program began and has grown exponentially in just the past few years. Students are now participating in the first Tech Challenge Robotics competition and the American Computer Science League competitions. At Hommocks Middle School, students are building and programming 3D printers and becoming adept at using Rhino software. Again, this is going to need some explanation to our crowd. The entire district recently participated in Hour of Code with STEM activities planned at all of the schools. Hands-on STEM learning at all levels, K to 12, lays foundation for more advanced work in college and beyond. For a more extensive biography of Dr. Shapps, I point you to the district website. Today, Bob will talk about STEM initiatives in the district and in the community. And this includes curricular initiatives, extracurricular activities, and summer programs for all of our kids. So we welcome and thank you too, Bob. In terms of format, each of our speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes to talk to you, and then we'll open the floor to questions. What I'll ask the speakers to do, because we're mic'd for this room but not for LMC TV, is to repeat your questions before they answer them. And now I give you Meg Koifer. Thank you so much. Do you want to go with this? To make sure people can hear.
First, I'm just going to make sure. Can people hear? Is that sufficient? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I can say Sabrina, Elaine, and Lynette for the original invitation. As an educator, there's nothing that excites me more than to be in a room full of people who are curious about something. So the fact that it also happens to be a topic that I love is that much more exciting. I did prepare some information. I am a techie, so I love to have AV, so I'm going to work with paper today. But I can honestly say, as I was driving here and wanting to really describe what STEM was, I've been looking at the recent meteorological patterns, and I'm thinking, does this really need a lot of explanation about why this is so critical? Because it seems that Mother Nature is yelling at us, pay attention, this is really important. But I will give some basic broad strokes about what STEM is. By definition, at its simplest terms, it is the words science, technology, engineering, and math. A lot of people right now are adding an A in for art because of the natural interface of artistic skills with these exact same disciplines. It's not those disciplines in a discrete manner, however. It's not looking at the topic of science or the topic of technology as being in a siloed inquiry base. To the contrary, STEM and STEAM is actually about the interface of these disciplines and looking at them in an applied context. So using our understanding of the very information that's contained in those disciplines and then applying it to real-world solutions. So to that extent, STEM is not so much a curriculum as it is a mindset. It's an approach to learning that looks for questions, answers, problem solving, out-of-the-box thinking, and looking at skills that we can apply to real-world problems. There are a couple of catch terms that came up already that I wanted to just kind of put out there so that you can be aware of them. The first one is making and maker spaces. The idea there, and this is something that comes straight from the White House with very, very strong support, the idea there is helping our youth go back to our skills as handworkers and makers of things, moving away from the consumption and the use of items to the creation of things that we need for our world. And so that's where this tag word making or maker spaces comes from. Creative design is another very important term that's being used right now. That points specifically to the interface of art and design with engineering. So again, it's the idea that when you take creative elements and put it towards design, you come up with innovation. A third term that's very popular right now is prototyping or fabrication labs. Manufacturing is critical, and there's going to be a lot of that in the world, but we also need ways to respond more rapidly, and that is more often done in fabrication spaces, spaces that allow you to think, you know, why isn't this device working, and create an immediate solution to that, a new valve or a better screw or a better hinge through rapid prototyping. And so that's what you're hearing when you're hearing terms like rapid prototyping or fabrication labs. That's where they're coming up with very quick responses to problems. And then lastly, there's kind of the computer science bucket, which includes words like robotics. First, Lego League Robotics is a very common thing right now. It's a fabulous competition-based program for studying robotics. Coding, that is writing software. Almost everything we do today has a code behind it. When you swipe your credit card, when you turn on your car's engine and there's a screen that appears, all of that has code behind it. Gaming is obviously using code for games, which is very popular. And then app development. Apps are applications, mostly for mobile devices. But again, it's all code-based. So why is STEM so important? In the Alliance, we like to talk about three major references here about why this is such an imperative and so critical. Curiosity, employability and job growth, and then social equality. I love this quote by Albert Einstein. I'm going to read it. "I am neither clever nor particularly gifted. I'm very, very curious." And I think anybody who's spent a certain amount of time with children would say they're insatiably curious. Unfortunately, that curiosity can decline very rapidly. And so in a little infographic that I put on this sheet, we talk about CQ, creative quotient, versus your intelligence quotient. And that increasingly your creativity quotient is more important than your raw intelligence. Unfortunately, scientists who have looked at this and done testing, they find that 3 to 5-year-olds score at a 98%. 98% of them score at a genius level for creativity. At the young age of 25, on the same device or the same testing mechanism, only 2% of 25-year-olds score at the genius level of creativity. So there's natural declines that happen, but we want to undo that. And we think that STEM education is one of the areas for that, for the creativity of our youth to be expanded and supported. Also, it validates the cultural context of youth. They are actually, in their own doings, embracing and using science, technology, engineering, math all the time. And it brings that into the classroom and validates their cultural context in a critical way. That increases engagement and motivation for the youth. And then lastly, it makes learning relevant. There's no doubt that there's enormous amount of fabulous text and other types of learning materials available. But if we have, for example, the need to work on marine biology, we also have the sound right here. And so it takes learning and makes it very, very relevant to the daily lives that people are living in. The second category of urgency around STEM education is employability and job growth. I could have picked just about a gazillion infographics on this. I've chosen a couple. The themes and the statistics are very, very clear. Essentially, over the past 10 years, growth in STEM jobs was 3 times that in non-STEM jobs. 80% of the fastest growing occupations in the United States are in STEM fields. Unfortunately, our children are not necessarily well prepared for those job opportunities. So to make it as simple as possible, essentially, right now and going into the future, there are right now jobs available and nobody to fill them, and that trend is continuing. So there's a real imperative around the need to have people trained for the jobs that are going to be there. I'd also like to add to this the notion of our economic stability in the region and here in our community. If we can attract industry and other types of folks who are working in these fields, then we are going to also have stronger economic growth in our region. So it's not just about the individual, it's also about our communities and our economic stability as a region. And then we come to the very, very critical piece about social equality. You are less likely to experience joblessness if you have studied in a STEM field, if you have those skills. And more importantly, you're going to command 26% higher wages than people working in non-STEM disciplines. Again, to put it very, very simply, this is becoming the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Are we really giving people the access that they need to future socioeconomic stability? And then you take a deeper dive on this and you look at who's studying in these fields. 75% of all college students are women and students from underrepresented, students of color or underrepresented minorities. But they represent only 45% of STEM degrees. So here again, we see a massive disparity. And so what can we do to make sure that this messaging is getting to everyone and that access to great learning is being created for everyone in these disciplines? So what can we do? If we believe in the STEM imperative, if we understand that it's a mindset and not just a curriculum, if we understand that it's applied learning opportunities, then what can we do? Well, obviously, we thought we would form an alliance. That was our approach. Our vision at the STEM Alliance of Larchmont Mamaroneck is to serve as a network connecting our community to STEM inquiry as a means of solving problems and fostering innovation. We've worked in 4 general areas to do this. The first is through partnership. We believe very deeply that there are stakeholders right here in our community who are working in these disciplines, who care about these areas, and that it's critical that we create a conversation among these various stakeholders. I've listed many of them. I've probably left a gazillion off. We're already in conversation with a lot of these people and coordinating ways for them to work with youth both inside and outside of the classroom. As a matter of fact, Solarize Westchester is right here in the room. That's one of our conversation partners. You can look at a very specific example like that. Yes, they want to put solar energy in our district, but as that initiative is happening, how can that be used to leverage learning for youth? And so those are the types of conversations that the STEM Alliance is helping to coordinate. The second thing that we're doing is simply growing the conversation. So we've built a website that we think has critical resources for various people who visit it, particularly parents, regarding events, programming, learning opportunities, and such. We have a newsletter. We're using social media for event and programming promotion. And then also we're looking at targeted PR campaigns. So in the month of January, we did 4 dedicated blasts only around the topic of girls in STEM. We realize that sometimes we live in an evangelical conversation about this, but that doesn't mean it's on everybody's radar all the time. And so we see ourselves as being able to kind of, be a reservoir of that information and then push out critical points at critical moments. For programming, we've done, I think, quite a lot in our young history. STEMtastic Saturday, the festival that was mentioned, creating hands-on opportunities for people to see these disciplines as fun and be in direct contact with experts in these fields. We are thrilled this year to be partnering with the district and taking a piece of STEMtastic Saturday and pushing it into the school day the day before on Friday. So this year it's actually going to be a 2-day festival, and STEM experts are going to be meeting in roundtable discussions with our seniors, another critical moment before they're heading off to really describe to them pathways and possibilities. Because by the way, just because you love STEM doesn't mean you're going to be a doctor, which is kind of where that happened before. First, Lego League Robotics, developing that at Homix with conversations with the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle. We're having a STEM summit, a little bit different than this, but some focus groups about creating pathways of STEM learning. One of the cautions with the excitement of this movement is not splintering what we're doing. There's a lot that we could do. We will be better and stronger if we look at K-12 pathways for children to move through. Perhaps it's a technology strand or a sustainability strand. That's what we want to work on with some focus groups. And we are also sending a wonderful group of 7th grade girls to the the Association for American University Women's Conference for 7th grade girls with STEM mentors, which we're thrilled about. That's in March. Lastly, we do seek funding. We want to increase resources for STEM learning. We want to apply for grants in conjunction with partners. We want to bring various people together to have competent programs. And we want to support dedicated fundraising initiatives. If there's any other information you want about us, we are on the web, and these slides will be up there within the next day or so. It's at www.lmstemalliance.org. I can hand it over.
So, obviously, you can see that Meg has a ton of energy. It really has been wonderful to work in partnership with the STEM Alliance, but with Meg, we really believes in, thank you, certainly believes in STEM education, but more so, I think, believes in the principles of authentic learning, of critical thinking, of collaboration, of preparing our children for the future. And I think from a school's perspective and an educational leader, this really is a policy issue that has come home to roost in terms of our ability in public education to prepare students for the future. We are, after all, a formal educational institution, but we are trying to adapt to what I think is a world that's changing and ensure that our students leave us prepared for an unknown future. I think Meg touched on some key points. We really don't know the jobs of the future. We don't know what students will be doing, but there are some foundational experiences around critical thinking, collaboration, adaptability, the ability to think quickly with others across the world, that are social and educational skills that need to be developed and promoted and tested during their years in public education. So we're thrilled to have such a wonderful, rich partnership with the STEM Alliance and with our community, because we have so many talented people living amongst us as well. So how does this play out in the school, or how has this played out in the school? So I'm going to give you a few examples that in some ways are just forming, some examples of curricular opportunities that are well on their way, and then where we're going for the future. It's interesting, this initiative, STEM, which is on another acronym, we love acronyms in education, has actually been around for quite some time. I think Meg talked about the relationship across disciplines that becomes critically important, and it was really in 2006 through the American Competes Act that President Bush, with Congress, paid close attention to declining numbers of American graduates with engineering degrees and our competitive nature with other countries around the world in the area of math and science, and it really brought to the forefront and how schools and how educations are preparing students to compete in this global economy. As it's translated into the curriculum, I can point to many examples where we really are off and running. We talked about our computer science program. 3 years ago, if you entered into Mamaroneck High School, you wouldn't find a computer science course. And in 3 years now, we have over 125 high school students who are enrolled in some form of computer science programs. We offer an introduction to computer science. We have a computer science 2. We just introduced this year advanced placement computer science, and we began last year a formal year-long robotics course. What's interesting here is that, as Meg mentioned, it's not about these silos of looking at these content specifically within a particular discipline. Most of our students enjoy and have the pleasure of connecting their learning that is happening in the classroom to real-world problems outside the schoolhouse, and I'll give you a few examples. Last year, we had 3 students participate in New York City in a New York Poly competition where they brought together a computer programmer, what I would say designer, and an inventor, so to speak, to come up with a now patent, or waiting for a patent, sensor that will allow quarterbacks and professional football players, colleges, to anticipate an open receiver by reading a play that is presented through a microprocessor. So we had a high school quarterback who was interested in improving his decision making in terms of his passing accuracy. We had a computer programmer who was able to design and take those football plays and put it into a program. And we had a tinkerer who was able to come up with a microprocessor idea to be able to flash reads of a quarterback that were open and closed based on coverage within seconds, and be able to put this all together and sell it as a product that professional football players, quarterbacks like Tom Brady, and institutions like University of Michigan could use to develop their throwing accuracy. This was an idea that was generated by a single student that came together in collaboration with 2 other students, and have now gone through 3, what I would say, generations of experimenting with this design that I think in the future will replace a football coach on a golf cart with a net trying to simulate an open receiver. So that's a small example of the kind of what I would say, processes that are underway in our schools. This fall, we had, I think, close to 60 of our students participate in a Carnegie Mellon cybersecurity competition, which was an international competition, where students were essentially given the following prompt. You enter an apartment, your father's lying there dead, there's a briefcase, you need to find out what happened. And really going through a myriad of challenges, these students had to program and to break through to solve a real-life problem. And our students, I'm happy to report, our students ended up as a team in the top 10% of all students, and there were thousands of teams across America participating, outperforming a lot of the science magnet schools from across the country. So we were very proud about that. This year we've had over 70 students participate in the American Computing Science League, which is a national and international competition, again, where students are competing in complex problems, real-world applications, against peers from around the world. And right now, they're in the midst of the second round. They're still in the top 10, and we hope that they're going to travel to Florida in May for the national finals, which is really exciting. Beginning last weekend, we had 19 high school students participate in a Pace University, really graduate-level computer science program in preparation for the USA Computer Science Olympiad, which is the most prestigious computer science competition around the globe that many of the students, and we really have 4 American students who go on to the world finals, get to compete against their peers from around the world in problem-solving computer science, and it's exciting. This year we launched our first MHS robotics team that participated in 2 regional competitions sanctioned by a national program on robotics. We're excited that so many students came together to participate. So those are just a few examples of what's happening. In addition to last year, our students participating with the FBLA competition, Future Business Leaders of America, with web design, app design, and I think one other program software design as well, where our students placed as national winners and finalists against students from across America. In addition to that, we have a lot going on in this idea of wondering, curiosity, what I would say is inquiry. This year we launched a pilot program for a capstone project, which is really, as Meg suggested, the opportunity for students to just apply their wonderings, their thinking about a question, a problem, and to really become researchers and problem solvers. This is happening in the next few months for all of our 5th grade students. Our middle school students are going to focus on the area of problems in math and science, with hopes that by next year, all of our 8th graders will focus on a capstone project, which is a deep inquiry project, and present publicly to an audience to talk about their understanding of what could be a problem about the Long Island Sound. It could be about sustainability, trash, and so on. So we're thrilled with the opportunity for students to apply their interests, their wonderings, their questions. The beginning of this year was great to see our 5th graders being asked to respond to, what do you wonder about? And you'd be surprised what comes out of their mouths. For those of you who are really interested in this idea of curiosity, I encourage you to Google Sir Ken Robinson. And it's a wonderful YouTube clip or a TED Talk about how schools have in fact killed curiosity, how kindergarten students come to schooling with a lot of awe and a sense of wonder, and how we are taking that away from them over the years. Well, here at Mamaroneck, we're trying to undo that. We're trying to move away from what I would say is that basic curriculum and give students the opportunity to go deeper and explore. We're very proud of our original science research program that has been in place for a long time, producing both Intel and Siemens winners, and their ability to work alongside real researchers to get a sense of what it means to go into scientific research. we have seen the explosion of interest in our middle school in the area of technology. We have each week about 75 middle school students, and thankfully a lot of girls, participate in a after-school tech club working on design, engineering, and really computer programming activities. And that has continued on into the high school, and so we're thrilled for that, what I would say is pipeline of interest for many students overall. One of the things I want to say is that where are we going, or where do we anticipate? This evening, if you are paying attention to our board meeting, I have the opportunity to touch on some new initiatives. We are fortunate to have a very talented art teacher who really has extensive background in the area of design. And I have spent last several years looking at Stanford University's School of Design model that really speaks to what Meg has touched on around cross-disciplinary inquiry in design and engineering, focusing on bringing the art world with sciences. And we are about to promote and have the board consider a 4-year design program, which will allow students to get fundamental knowledge about design, and then by their senior year work in cross-disciplinary teams to actually replicate what happens in the design field outside around us. Our hope is that they're going to attach this to some social problem in our area, in our community, where they can come up with a solution that will really make a connection between their local environment and the principles of design. And we're thrilled by that. We think it's a fantastic opportunity, and we know that it will generate a lot of interest in our students as well. It's safe to say that the STEM disciplines, in terms of the opportunities that offer our students, is really being focused on in terms of the schools, but more so by the fact that we have so many students interested in starting to enroll in these courses. As Meg said, we know that coding is going to be critically important in the future. It's to no surprise that our 9th and 10th grade students are thrilled to have the opportunity to learn Java, to actually learn multiple programming languages and apply that outside of school, and we're excited by that. Through the foundation, the Mamaroneck Schools Foundation, we've been fortunate to get grants for Raspberry Pi microprocessors. I encourage you to look that up. It's a great way to teach basic programming to students, as well as the ability to use app design software, which none of our students are currently doing in the advanced computer science class. So we're just getting started. It's very clear in terms of this area. Over the next few months, we are going to have our own internal summit working with a consultant, because New York State just approved the Next Gen Science Standards. And our goal through this budget and really next year is to think about, and I'll give Meg the opportunity to talk about how the maker movement, which is an organic movement that is really occurring outside the schools, is going to come into our schools, to give students the opportunity during the school day to tinker, to deal with the basic ideas of circuits and inquiry and hands-on learning. We want to focus on making connections between our science standards and the opportunities for students to explore throughout. Finally, we're excited that through a foundation grant that will be announced this evening, that our students will be able to, at the middle school, participate in their 3-year technology program using drones and vinyl cutters. So that fabrication lab that Meg mentioned will be a part of our everyday experience with students in grades 6 through 8. So a lot is happening, a lot more will happen, and it's hard to keep up not only with Meg, but with the pace of things as it relates to STEM. It's interesting, we talked about STEM and STEAM in the art component. Some people refer to STEAM as applied mathematics, because another piece to this really, in the next few years, we know that big data and the use of big data is going to be huge for those going into the marketplace. And so as much as they want to talk about the art piece to STEAM, there's also this notion of applied mathematics that will play into it as well. So I turn it to you.
I think we turn it to questions now.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much. I have a question first for the audience. Who wants to go back to school? Questions for our speakers? Elaine.
The urgency of this new curriculum is apparent. I'm wondering whether the school system is thinking about making a new requirement for graduation within this field, so that it's not left just to the volition or choice of the student, but is a requirement that the school system feels is important for each child upon graduation to have gotten some part of this.
It's a great question.
want to
If I-
repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. The question is, this is such an important kind of time in learning. How do we ensure that all students have access to or have some experience in the area of STEAM? It's a great point. I think one of the things we're talking about, and it's interesting, you know that we have a wonderful, vibrant world language program. And we offer, beginning in 6th grade, the opportunities for students to try out their interest in Mandarin, in French, and Spanish. One of the things we're thinking about for next year is introducing a 4th language that is coding. And so to that point, how do we interest students right from the beginning and some experience that is foundational that gives them choice? Interesting, in 3 years in the high school, we, just by word of mouth, more and more students are participating and want to be a part of this. I failed to mention that we're also looking to expand our engineering curriculum because we know, as part of the acronym, that engineering is critically important to our students for the future. And we do have an introductory course, but we're looking to extend the number of course offerings in engineering and the cross-disciplinary interest between computer programming and engineering as well. So we do expect that we will introduce this or have this as a foundational experience for all students in the years ahead.
I'd like to ask, it was thrilling to listen to both of you, really wonderful. I'd like to ask a rather sort of a downer question about everything you do is very forward-thinking and creative and all of that. But backward thinking are multiple choice tests, which you're required to deal with. How do you how do you balance this with what I think is the very sort of the drag of teaching to a test?
Yes, so the question is, how do you balance kind of this forward-thinking approach to creative, hands-on work in the testing environment that we live in? That's also a reality. And I can address that to a certain extent. Obviously, I think policy is a slightly different issue. But I do think that we are lucky to be in a district that's already thinking that way in terms of the introduction of capstone projects. So the idea is, there are things and realities that we cannot change. There are things that are mandated upon us that we have to follow and go through. On the other hand, we can augment, and those are the opportunities that we want to create. Whether that be, for example, introducing this first LEGO League Robotics Club at the middle school after school, or the tech club after school. So there's after-school enrichment, there's summer programming, and then on top of that, the district is doing, I think, a yeoman's job of putting in other places wherever they can opportunities. And I kind of also want to say that it's one of the areas that I love our special subject teachers. We have had, for example, our tech teacher, our art teacher come to us and say, nobody ever used to care about us, but now this is kind of where it's happening. And so I do think there are other places in the day that we can leverage creating more hands-on experiences for youth.
And I just want to add that certainly I feel fortunate to work in a community that a Board of Education is forward-thinking, and also our ability to take advantage of wonderful resources within our community. We just met again with Sheldrake. We have a long-standing program with Sheldrake and looking to expand the opportunity for authentic learning that really allows students to, again, visit an environment to kind of go knee-deep, no pun intended, into learning and bring that back to the school. And I think those rich opportunities provide that sense of authenticity that is important, that really propels students forward to do well on any test. Similarly, the idea of capstone is our way of saying we need to kind of stay true to what we value in learning. And this idea of deep learning, deep understanding will transcend tests and allow students good critical thinking skills that we think will allow them still to do well on tests, but change the focus of what that day-to-day experience looks like.
I'm going to add one more piece to that, just as a very specific example. One of the students that he talked about in that project with the quarterback training device, that student was a maker in my basement in 7th and 8th grade. So these after-school enrichment opportunities directly impact what they're doing in school. And so I think every layer that we add in will affect and impact and give them opportunities.
How can you address to excite girls to get involved in STEM? College-age students in engineering and math tend to be predominantly male at the engineering and tech type schools. How do we make this exciting for young girls?
I love that question because it's something we're looking at really carefully this year inside with our volunteers in the Alliance. These are the takeaways for us. Oh, I'm sorry, the question is how do we engage girls? Why aren't they coming forward and what can we do to improve that? For us, these are the themes that are coming out. First of all, it really is about PR. It's making sure that their families and the people who are in contact with them on a regular basis, teachers, other potential mentors for them, are giving them the opportunity and the contact with these disciplines that they need. Second, it's making it cross-disciplinary. That is very much in the nature of girls and giving them access to the resources and the materials that are compelling to them. This is not to say that girls are limited in their materials, but having a diversity of materials makes a difference. And so that's where, again, that A for art can be very appealing to many of our young designers who are female. Lastly, we look at critical moments. That's why the American Association for University Women does their conference for 7th grade girls. There's a lot that happens in that middle school moment about identity development. This is where they either start stepping backwards or stepping forward. And so we know that those middle school years are critical. Lastly, what I think is really interesting is the research around girls stepping forward together. Girls very often, again, any girl can be an individual, but there are some common threads that suggest that girls step forward together. And so that's why the Alliance doesn't just want to put out this conference information and say, go to this conference, it's really neat. We've worked very closely with the district. We're printing t-shirts. We're putting the girls on the same bus to go together. They need a cohort. They need a sense of common shared identity so that they don't feel that they're the only one that's doing this. And I would say that that's not uncommon in STEM in general. Very often the youth talk about those are my people. And I think that it's critical in STEM education that just like musicians work in orchestras and plays are performed with large productions and such. Do it yourself does not mean do it alone. And part of what's going on in the STEM movement is connecting people who have these passions to each other. And that's very critical for girls.
And we're seeing good results. I mean, the number of students enrolled in high school computer science has tripled in 2 years. And so with the after-school clubs where students are, males and females are together, we're seeing a steady stream of girls who are interested in coding, robotics, and we're optimistic over the next years that we're going to see that shift as well.
I'm very glad to hear this latest on the girls. I'm very concerned about in the lower socioeconomic groups, the people that can be left out because I haven't heard you emphasize much about the very early grades because the access to computers, all of that for the very little ones, and the kind of emphasis in their own homes when you have to take parents working, all the issues that come into these. What is being done to really start them at the very early level?
Right. So the question is, how do we deal with interest of the early elementary grades and also with minority students as well having access to these programs? I will say that in our school system now, I'm pleased that we have talented teachers who at the elementary grades are doing informal, hands-on learning with students each day. That both I would say at our elementary schools, our computer TAs have go beyond their roles and have on many occasions working with students on robotics and basic circuitry. And so we're in the next step right now, as I mentioned, of really formalizing a K-5 a curriculum that is going to be tied to science standards that will allow all elementary students the opportunity to go deeper in this area. We've talked about and looked at the makerspace that exists in some schools. We're fortunate to be one of 2 summer makerspace programs around the country where through our co-op camp, our middle school students are doing this as well. And I think it's unique, and certainly we feel quite proud of the fact that students are experiencing what we'd say is the hands-on learning and the curiosity over the summer, and this is going to be our 3rd summer of offering that program to students in the co-op camp program. So it's exciting.
And I would speak again there to the notion of partnerships. So the STEM Alliance has been meeting with the Hispanic Resource Center, for example, and looking very carefully so that when information is going out about a conference like this, or another program that we've worked on is with MasterCode. There's a program that, with MasterCard is offering a special Girls Who Code club. And so whenever we look at programming options, part of our responsibility is to make sure that the information is getting to everyone. One last thing that I really want to point to is what's called this one-to-one initiative. If you ever see a 1 and a colon and a 1, that was even hard for me to get for a while. But that is, I think, a phenomenal effort that the district has made to put iPads in the hands of certain grades. I think right now is it 8 through 10?
Yes, it is.
So all 8th through 10th graders have iPads at school. We can debate this a million ways about what the pros and cons of that are, but I want to put out there that one of the most critical elements of that is that everybody's playing on the same field. Everybody has access to the same technology. And I think that that is, the fact that the district sees how relevant and important that is should not be understated. And that's another way to create access, is simply for everybody to have access to the equipment.
Sort of following up on the question that was asked. You immediately ran to the middle school and the high school. The question was asked, you have a large minority population, much of which does not speak English, much less speak whatever the language of the computer. What are you doing at the kindergarten, preschool, first and second grade levels? Forget about the middle school.
So I don't believe I was ducking. I was trying to say it's a work in progress. I will say that we had all of our elementary students participate in the National Hour of Code this year, which for a school district our size is phenomenal. That is, every student at every grade had an opportunity to learn about computer programming to generate interest. We also have a series of after-school clubs that are offered to students to really do a lot of hands-on learning around robotics. And again, what I would say is a basic experiences around programming and curiosity. There's a wonderful language, Scratch, which was invented at MIT, which a number of our elementary students are familiar with, which allows for basic programming skills to develop really with hands-on learning. We are in the process. We are holding off in many respects because we're waiting for the approval of the next gen science standards, because our goal is to really anchor the experiences K through 5 for students in the area of STEM around these science standards, which really guide our thinking about this approach. We are fortunate to have a number of what I would say is great partners in our PTAs and so forth that are creating after-school activities for students. But students each day visit our computer labs, and all classes and all schools have the opportunity to engage in this level of work. So I'm thrilled about it. I also say that all of our 5th graders will go through the capstone process this spring using Chromebooks to kind of satisfy their basic technology skills. So a lot's happening that we've described here, but there's a lot to come.
Curiosity and imagination is a very diverse thing. Kids go in all different directions. As indicated here, with the great curiosity that exists when they enter school and it's an interest. What is the school system doing to help identify the specific curiosities of the youngest students and encourage them along this path so that their curiosity is maintained and engaged?
So it's interesting. This year we had Sure. So we started to talk about curiosity, how important it is, and how it diminishes over time in schools, the idea that schools kill curiosity. So what are we doing as educational leaders to promote curiosity and unpack and uncover that and create the opportunities for students to be curious, right? So, the youngest. So here's a great example. We were fortunate to bring to our district for a whole week for a residency Martha Horn, who's a national well-respected author and educator from Harvard University. She really worked with our kindergarten teachers to talk about how we can promote this idea of writing and thinking in our kindergarten students. So we take it for granted in many respects that all of us have a story to tell. All of us are authors, but we really spent a week with Martha exploring opportunities for kindergarten teachers to really promote every student as an author. And, on its very basic level, the idea of telling a story, to be able to kind of put that together both verbally and in language, written language, is the first step of how we kind of create our thoughts, our in a sense of curiosity, where we want to go as thinkers. So I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to support that. And it really is about transforming the beginnings of education to allow students to tell stories, to wonder, to ask questions. And those basic opportunities are really what carries through, throughout our elementary grades. Martha's going to come back next year and work with our first grade students. It's very simple, hands-on, what I would say, specific experiences that will lead us down the path to things like a capstone, to what I would say is science research in the high school. So it's putting the thread together, and I think we're really putting the focus on that in our school system.
Dr. Schatz, you had referred to the world language program in connection with, I guess, computer language. And our students at the Hammock and at the high school decided to take a language. And I was wondering what if any relationship there is with language training and education and the STEM program. And in full disclosure, my wife is a language teacher in the Hammock.
So I would say so the question is, what about world language? How does our world language program someplace fit into a broader discussion about STEM? I did talk about our recommendation to provide students the opportunity in middle school to learn a fourth language, that is computer programming. I would say that certainly one aspect of second language acquisition that's critically important is the ability to communicate around the world. I mean, I would say that we know going forward that, and it's happening now, that you are expected as part of your job to communicate across cultures with individuals who may be working on a project in different parts of the world. So any time you have an opportunity to learn a second language, that's going to make you employable, so to speak, or provide that opportunity. For us, it's come down to a second kind of entry point, and that is cognitive switching. This is our third year of introducing a district dual language program that is happening at Merrick Avenue School. It is a real dual language program, Spanish-English, where students are learning and alternating each day in language study through content. That is, I learn math in English one day, I go to next door to my second class, and I learn math in Spanish. And that is important to us based on the research. It really talks about the cognitive switching and the ability to kind of improve your thinking skills by being able to master two languages. And so we're thrilled by that. And a critical piece to that as well is the bicultural aspect of it. How do you appreciate and see the world through a bicultural lens? So I would love to say that it would be great to have a school system where we can offer 3 languages from K to 12. Our foray into dual language was really to provide an opportunity for students to become bilingual at a very early age, but take advantage of the cognitive benefits that the research shows around that.
If I may, that dual language program, that's limited to the Mamaroneck area?
No, it's a district program. There's a lottery. Matter of fact, we had 70 prospective kindergarten parents last week at MAS learning about it. I'd say that out of all those in attendance, about 50% were from Chatsworth, Murray, and Central interested in the program. We have a lottery. It's become very popular over the last 2 years. We have a cohort moving up to second grade next year, so we keep breaking a new cohort each year. So it really is open to all students. And what's nice is it's created a community around the program where parents are learning Spanish and English and meeting together as an extension of the program.
So my question, I didn't have the opportunity to work with a lot of New York colleges the last year, and it's amazing how passionate college kids are about sustainability. And so my question is, how in what you're doing are you helping kids think more about sustainability and working at, are there ways you're integrating it into the curriculum or?
I mean, I can answer that first generally, and then perhaps he can. I'm sorry. The question is, no, it's okay. With the excitement and the interest among young adults at colleges, let alone among community members around the themes of sustainability, how is that coming into play in the schools? And one thing I would mention is that that same grassroots energy that's happening just in the community overall is happening in people who are engaged in the schools as well. And so, for example, Chatsworth set last year through the PTA a 5-year agenda around being a green school. And they're doing that in coordination with classroom education, as well as initiatives that the parents are leading, as well as efforts with the administration there. So I think that that same grassroots conversation is coming into the schools as well. I think one of the things that we really want to look at, and that's why we want to have this STEM Summit and also circle around the Next Generation Science Standards. This Next Generation Science Standards, just to be clear about that, that is a curriculum. It was developed not by New York policymakers, but by a national group of scientists who are laying out what they think needs to be the curriculum agenda around STEM education. And some states have adopted it, including New York. So as we look at curriculum and look at the things that are resonating for people, the question is, how can we pursue those K-12 in a consistent fashion that creates lines of inquiry for kids? Otherwise, we're going to have kids bouncing all over the place in too many different directions, and it becomes very splintered. So that's just kind of a broad stroke answer. I don't know if you want to speak more specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I think in some very traditional ways, we touch on sustainability, whether it would be through advanced placement environmental science program, or what I would say is science education. But when you look at, for example, hummocks, we have our own greenhouse. We have gardens at all of our schools, and there's a strong emphasis on this idea of sustainability. I'm pleased to report that through a collaboration with the Joint Garbage Commission, Larchmont, Mamaroneck, with the Mamaroneck Schools Foundation and the administration, we just wrote a grant and were approved for the Rocket. And I don't know if you know what the Rocket is, but I've been talking about it for 3 years. It's a product that actually allows you to recycle food waste. And what's interesting is it creates a great opportunity for students to be the stewards of the environment. And what was interesting is as we were trying to push this proposal and grant through, the town had engaged graduate students at Columbia University to really assess a sustainability plan. And they came to the same conclusion that we did around the value of reducing trash, primarily food waste. And so we hope in September, our middle school students will be the stewards within their school of taking food waste products, putting it into the Rocket, and monitoring and watch it become compost. We hope in the spring to be able to provide the community service of giving out to our citizens rich hummocks compost in bags that will not only help their gardens, but it will allow the town to reduce their hauling costs. So there's a perfect example of a real hands-on way in which students kind of drive this issue. We're hoping that by becoming stewards of the Rocket, that they go on to find different opportunities. I've had a number of conversations with Chris Deedy from Harvard Graduate School of Education. There's a lot of work around game and virtual simulations in science. And, we are sitting here on the Jewel of the Sound and having the opportunity to develop through the National Science Foundation a simulation, a model where students can not only learn about sustainability and science through a virtual world, they can actually go out and look at change in the area of the water to kind of help them learn and take ownership of a resource that's in their backyard. So there's a lot of opportunities to do that in the classroom and out, and I think we're well on our way, whether it's our gardens, whether it's our greenhouses or the Rocket, soon to be Rocket.
And then, by the way, they're all going to be demanding that you have a composter in your house.
I'm really glad to know about the Garbage Commission, and I can't wait to find out what Jeff Negan does with that. Hey, watch. There you go. Stay tuned. I have so many questions, and you've got us curious in numerous ways, certainly me. The matter of, along with CI and CQ and IQ, I think about EQ and concerned about that in terms of any component with psychologists and developmental matters as they kind of work into it. The other, dynamic that is, I think, kind of exploding for you guys is the possibilities of funding and grant development. And there's another question, but my question in this moment is matters of ethics. And it's not just because I've been watching the British Parliament talk about free parents at all. And I would like to hear dare I say, morality, but also, you know, insofar as why, you know, so many horizons have not been crossed and parameters not crossed because of, you know, some constraint, perhaps from commerce and business and like. But again, the question is ethics and an ethical component, or a component about ethics in the midst of what STEM is doing. Might there be, or might there be something of that thought on the horizon?
Well, I think, yeah, so the question is about, if you haven't heard about this idea of ethics and how it plays into not only STEM, but everything we do in education. I think in one small slice, you know, it's interesting, with the access to technology that our students have, and certainly community members, we think it's critically important that our students become good digital citizens, and that there's an ethical issue to that we can at any time gain access to information, and how do we judge and evaluate and use that information in an ethical manner? And I think that's critically important, and really ensuring that each day we kind of remind students of their responsibility as a citizen in a technological age. What are those requirements to act responsibly and ethically around the use of information? Certainly the ethical nature of having businesses come into the schools and sell us products around data and student privacy. There's an ethical piece to that we're grappling with now, because we want to open and allow students to have full advantage of products. But there's this idea of who's getting hold of this information. How are we protecting children from big business that is impacting that as well? And then I think there's the ethics that really comes home and intersects with the family, individuals' beliefs around all of science and so forth. And how do we recognize that and talk about that rationally, but still inform our students about all the challenges that exist around this notion of ethical behavior and ethics. It's no surprise that colleges are now kind of going full circle, business schools, medical schools, and so forth, and really trying to put in an ethical component into education. I would love to have the opportunity to create a course for our seniors where we can focus on ethics and what does it mean to be ethical as an adult in a society going forward. So you raise a great point.
And I would reinforce that point with two other pieces. One word that hasn't come up that I think is a critical keyword is entrepreneurism. And as another example, in 5th grade, for example, and I believe this is across schools, they have to do a position piece on fair trade. And so as we look at the growth of industry and creating innovators, that's a whole other ethical line that they need to consider. There was one other example I was going to point to, which is simply, again, going back to validating their cultural context in the classroom. If we shut these devices and these things out of the classroom, then there's no groundwork for these ethical conversations. And so that's another reason that we need to bring these things that the youth value and that they're using into the classroom, because we have the adults who are incredibly well trained. Our staff are high-level professionals who look at these issues all the time. But if we don't give them the opportunity to see those dilemmas unfold in the classroom, then they can't bring their skills to those conversations.
Comment about the next generation science standards. Anybody really wants to dig into the guts of this, or we can get a very good overview and introduction. The National Academies Press will let you buy the book or give you a free PDF download of the entire book. So if you go to the National Academies Press, you can actually download the entire NGSS series. And you can go into the very, very gritty detail or get a very good picture.
To repeat what Harmon is saying, simply that the National Generation Science Standards, which is a very large document, is available for a free download. And what's the website again?
National Academies Press.
National Academies Press. It's also available for purchase, but you can do a free download. It is a very thick document. It's a lot. I have not read it all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Last question, Dave.
How are the Rhinex schools related to this?
That's great.
You know, I really can't speak to the Rhineck. I can say I'm very proud of our school system, the talented teachers we have, our dedicated administrators, the support from the community, the leadership of the board. We have come a long way. You know, it's interesting. We were lucky enough to hire a very talented, experienced computer science teacher at the high school. He has, you know, I felt proud as a superintendent to find a way to open school on a Sunday to help them plan for their robotics competition. It does take a village. It just takes the support of a wonderful STEM Alliance that has really not only interest in this for all of our students in our community, but we're just getting started. And I think we're very proud of the fact that in such a short time, we've developed a strong interest in our students in STEM fields. And tonight we'll talk about our design program, and we're looking to find new areas to make connections. I think the challenge is it is overwhelming. I mean, I think having a clear vision, staying true to that vision, seeking partnerships and input becomes critically important, but it moves fast and it moves quickly, and being strategic is equally important, and knowing when to slow down a little bit and really what to focus on becomes the hardest part in this discussion and the adventure.
And I would say the question was regarding Rhinex schools and how they're engaged in these discussions. For us as the Alliance, they are, all in conversation with us, and we believe very much that nobody needs to reinvent the wheel. We should all be sharing conversation and the things that we're doing. So we're in conversation with folks like Ray Laverso, who's a fabulous teacher over in Rhinex, Valerie Feit, who's the head of curriculum there. As well as a bunch of parents. There's a parent who started a first Lego team in her basement for her second and third grader. So we are in conversation with folks from Rhinex. We welcome people to reach out to us to look for deeper conversation, but we consider it all in the family, so to speak.